Well, right after the holidays of Thanksgiving and Black Friday, the next thing to look forward to is UFC 310. And by the way, speaking of Thanksgiving shout outs to Jesse on Fire for sending me a super chat in one of my live streams that I did during Thanksgiving night. So, with that in mind, the next order of business UFC 310. Kai Asukara getting a title shot on his UFC debut, and then Ian Garry versus Shavkat Rakhmonov, undefeated versus undefeated, and of course Pantoja is here to defend his title. Now, is he being overlooked in this particular matchup? I'm going to be honest and say, you know what? There is that, but there is the popularity of Kai Asukara, considering that he is fighting a UFC debut while getting a title shot. Now, that right there is just insane in and of itself. To be completely honest and candid, I do like the concept, and I'm going to tell you why. If the guy has enough accolades outside of the UFC and it qualifies him for a title shot, then so be it. At the same time, I also do think it weakens the position of the UFC. And why do you ask? Well, understand this, right? If the UFC has to bring somebody in, what does that tell you? That tells you that maybe they don't have all the best 125ers in the world, if not the best roster in the world. However, when you look at a matchup like Shavkat Rakhmonov and Ian Garry, you think to yourself, wow, okay, now we understand why the UFC is the best organization in the world. So, for instance, let's start with Ian Garry. What makes him right now one of the best 170 pounders in the world? What does it take to become one of the best 170 pound contenders in the world, if not make it to the championship level, which, by the way, is what is on the line with this fight between Shavkat and Ian Garry? Okay, it's literally a number one contender matchup because Shavkat was supposed to fight Bilal Muhammad and it never came through. But once again, let's ask the question, what makes Ian Garry one of the top 170 pounders in the world, and what could potentially lead him to win this matchup? Well, look, right here, this is a footage of Ian Garry training with UK Muay Thai legend Liam Harrison. If you notice, Ian Garry is very detailed with his technique. Also, the way that he fights, he understands range and distance, and he's going to use it to his advantage. And perhaps maybe this is what is going to win him this fight against Shavkat Rakhmonov. As for Shavkat, what makes this man extremely dangerous? Well, I can tell you, not only can he knock you out, he can also wrestle. Here he is right here training with welterweight Bellator contender Jackson. And again, there's Gilbert Burns in the camp. He's also trained with Ian Garry as well, not to mention, which, by the way, makes this fight really interesting with two guys that sort of really understand each other, sort of understand how they're going to nullify each other. But like I said, knockout power, has submission capabilities, has great wrestling pedigree, okay, because every Eastern European has great wrestling pedigree, from the Dagestanis to the Georgians to the Czech Republic to the Turks. The list goes on. Bottom line, he's going to cause some problems of wrestling for Ian Garry in this fight, but will Ian Garry nullify it? If and when he does, I think that's where this fight gets really, really interesting. So whether we are talking about the finishing capabilities of Shavkat Rakhmonov or the range-finding distance skills of Ian Garry, one thing remains for sure, and we're going to talk about all of that, but one thing remains for sure is that it really matters who you train with, which, by the way, brings us to the next question of the Japanese fighter, Kai Asukara. For a long time, the Japanese haven't been really fighting at the world championship level of the UFC. That is, of course, until on the boxing side, you had the likes of Inoue and now Kai Asukara, who's coming in here. Which, by the way, a lot of hardcore fans are going to ask, is this guy tested in any kind of way? Well, we're going to find out. Now, as I've mentioned, Japan has one combat sports superstar right now, and that is in the world of boxing with the likes of Inoue. Now, it does sort of puzzle me and makes me wonder why this guy fights at Monday or Tuesday or this and that. However, I have seen a few Japanese mixed martial arts and boxing cards that have sort of took place right around the middle of a weekday. And I got to wonder, what is the reason behind that? Is it the scheduling of, let's say, the overall society? Maybe Mondays, there's a lot more people that are off as opposed to people that are working on Saturdays. I know there are a lot of people out there that sort of have jobs that are predicated on making a sale on a Saturday. For example, if you're in car sales or this and that. But yeah, a topic for another time and this and that. Shout outs to all the people that are out there working hard, listening to this content while they are at work. So aside from Inoue, the next Japanese superstar that we have coming up in the world of professional combat sports is Kai Asukara. And I got to tell you, man, there are big reasons and good reasons why the UFC is giving him a title shot literally in his first UFC outing. Now, what's up with that? We're going to analyze and talk about that and find out more about Kai Asukara as we break down this whole entire card, not just the main focus of the co-main and main event. So the question and common curiosity that hardcore fans have of Kai Asukara is just how good is he really? Well, we're getting a glimpse right now in the training video of him and Merab, the current 135 champion of the world right now. So why is this significant? Well, for a couple of reasons, right? Number one, obviously, it's really important to have the right training partners, as I emphasized earlier, with Shavkat and with Ian Garry, and that is the reason why they are where they're at today. But if you look at Kai, you ask yourself, is the hype really all that warranted? Now, obviously, he has a win over one Archuleta. He has a win over Kai Horiguchi, only for Kai Horiguchi to come back and get a win over him. He has a loss back in 2019 from Manel Cap. He lost a finals in a one-night tournament in Rochester. And obviously, the second time around, he lost to a decision. So it was his second time fighting that night. So again, it remains a little bit mysterious just how good Kai Asukara is. And I think that we are also sort of forgetting how good Pantoja is. We're also forgetting the life story that Pantoja has going on. And based on underestimating that, I think that we may be overlooking him because we're sort of romanticizing ourselves in seeing this Kai Asukara come in here and win on his UFC debut, because obviously it's a great story to get behind, right? But one thing remains for sure is that we cannot count out Pantoja in this fight. So if you reach the point of this video, I think you're starting to realize that I like using training footage to sort of add into my content. And there's a good reason for that, which I'm going to explain in a little bit. But for whatever reason, I'm having a little bit of a trouble finding any training footage of Pantoja. And that begs a lot of questions in that separate matter at hand. However, I did run across one video where supposedly Sean O'Malley knocked him out during training. And again, I always tell people it is important who you train with in order to get ready for high-level MMA, right? At the same time, you also got to understand what happens in training, just like the great Allen Iverson once said. It's just practice. Bro, we just talking about practice. Okay? We can't take too much away from it.
Arena and you see me play, you see me give everything I got. We talking about practice right now.
So I'm not going to take too much away from that because once again, we just talking about practice. It's just practice, dog. But I will say, here's a couple of interesting things that I found out about Alexander Pantoja. Well, not that I just found out, but a common fact that he has a win over Manel Kape, and Manel Kape has a win over Kai Asukara. So what exactly all that means? Well, it was an obvious decision that he got over Manel Kape. However, Manel Kape did manage to finish Kai Asukara, which, by the way, I got to tell you, it sort of goes in line with the Japanese style of MMA and how they appreciate their fighters, right? Obviously, you look at Kai, he's not an undefeated prospect like Ian Garry or Shavkat Rakhmonov to any degree. He's not that at all. But what you have is an exciting fighter that comes back after making a mistake and having a little bit of some mishaps in their career. Now, again, it kind of brings back into the question of how will Ian Garry or Shavkat really bounce back after this loss? Because this is a big undefeated versus undefeated fight. We all remember some of the biggest undefeated versus undefeated fights in boxing, right? I mean, take a look at Floyd Mayweather and Ricky Hatton, for example. Now, obviously, the lead up to the fight was absolutely amazing, like most Floyd Mayweather lead ups, like most Conor McGregor lead ups, like most Canelo lead ups. All these fights that take a world tour in order for you to market them, they usually have a very interesting and entertaining press conferences and lead ups to those particular events. However, what is even more significant about those particular events is how will the two undefeated parties that are involved going to deal with the loss? Because, you know, the old saying goes, right? Somebody's O has got to go. So what happened when Ricky Hatton was defeated by Floyd Mayweather? What happened in his career afterwards? Well, unfortunately, it led Ricky Hatton's life into shambles. He started gaining a whole bunch of weight, started becoming an alcoholic, and became a shell of himself. Whereas Floyd Mayweather went on to become the biggest fighter in the whole entire sport, if not all of combat sports, made a whole bunch of money with Pacquiao, made a whole bunch of money with Sugar Shane Mosley, made a whole bunch of money with Conor McGregor, and the list goes on. So once again, the whole undefeated versus undefeated is a little bit different when it comes to how each party is going to take that loss, right? Well, once again, going back to Kai Asukara, this guy right here, he knew how to take his loss, and the Japanese really appreciated that. They appreciated the fact that, hey, you know what? This guy right here was able to take a loss and not only that, come back and win multiple belts, lose a tournament, a one-night tournament, which really is no shame. But at the same time, that is a reason why he's one of the biggest stars in the world of MMA right now. You look at his fights, we're talking about like in the millions, right? So there is a marketing reason behind why the UFC wants to push this guy so fast and literally within his first fight. But we also got to understand that this guy understands high-level competition. Now, I will admit that the 125 division right now is a little bit thin, which is the reason why they have a guy like this coming into the UFC and getting a title shot on his first fight. So, once again, does that weaken the position of the UFC as having the best fighters in the world? I think that if you're a hardcore fan, you already understand and know that there are other fighters around the world that can give any of these guys competition at any given rate, at any given day, and at any given time. We've seen it. Remember the Strikeforce, the Strikeforce purchase of the UFC. All these guys that were from Luke Rockhold, Jacare, a whole bunch of other names, Daniel Cormier, just to name a few. And in the WEC days, you had Benson Henderson coming in. He became champion. Anthony Pettis, he became champion. Donald Cerrone, he was there every step of the way in multiple fights, multiple scenarios, even title shots and a Conor McGregor fight. But yeah, you can't knock other organizations out there. Remember, Francis Ngannou is still out there looming around as the best heavyweight. Nobody's knocked him off just because Anthony Joshua did it in boxing. Guess what? That's boxing. But either way, we're going to take a look at the full card of this whole entire event, top to bottom. Obviously, the focus right now is the main event and co-main event. So I'm going to give you an official prediction before we go into the whole entire card. So we're going to do it a little bit different this time. I'm going to make a prediction for UFC 310 main event and co-main event, and then I'm going to go through the whole entire card. So in the main event, I'm going to have to go with Kai Asukara. I think there is a good chance that he's going to catch Pantoja. And if and when he does, I think the power is going to be enormous. Look, I understand that he lost against Manel Cap, right? But it's one of those situations where it's firepower versus firepower. But what if on this night, his firepower is going to get to him first? So I just think that Kai Asukara has a chance of doing that. Ian Garry versus Shavkat Rakhmonov, straight off the bat. I'm going to go with Ian Garry by decision. Now, why am I going to choose that particular pick for this fight? Because you're thinking Shavkat Rakhmonov, he already has knockouts, submissions, and has never gone to the scorecards. Well, that's exactly why I'm picking Ian Garry for this one. Because he's going to take him to the scorecards, and he knows how to take him to the scorecards. And the fact that they both trained with each other, the familiarity of that sparring speed is going to favor Ian Garry. So it's going to be a decision by Ian Garry. He's going to fight at range, maybe even get a takedown a few times, get him back up, and that's that. So now let's move on to the rest of the main cards, prelims, and the first fight of the evening. All right, so straight off the bat, obviously the fight right before the co-main event, it's going to be a heavyweight banger between Ciryl Gane and Alexander Volkov. Now, obviously, we've seen this matchup already. Ciryl Gane got the best of Volkov. Point fighting type of way, got the win. But I feel like Volkov is sort of in this finishing streak right now, right? I think that's going to lead him into a certain momentum in this fight that I think maybe a difference between the fight. Now, look, remember what I said. Garry, okay? They both have already sparred with each other, so they know how each other feels, right? They understand pattern, their footwork, their train of thought, what they're going to do in relationship to what they shouldn't do or what they're willing to do. And that little cat and mouse game that they're going to play in there when they are trying to figure each other out in a striking. Either way, I think it's going to be a little bit different this time. I know that in first fight, we saw that Alexander Volkov lost to Ciryl Gane by a decision. But in all honesty, I'm going to have to go with Volkov on this one where he actually gets a finish this time. I think that there's very few times we've seen Ciryl Gane get finished or knocked out, if ever. Obviously, Jones was able to submit him, but that's submission. Either way, I think this is the time that it's going to happen. I'm going to go with Alexander Volkov, second round TKO for the finish. Next, straight off the back, I'm going to go with Bryce Mitchell on this one. You're probably wondering, why am I quick to pick him over Kron Gracie? Well, obviously, Kron Gracie is a very inexperienced mixed martial arts fighter, and Bryce Mitchell is a very seasoned mixed martial arts fighter. This is not jiu-jitsu. I will be surprised if, you know what, matter of fact, I will not be surprised if Mitchell submits the heir to the throne of jiu-jitsu, Kron Gracie. I would not be surprised one bit. Rocks him a few times. He gets down on the ground, follows up, and gets a submission right off top, or maybe even a triangle choke somewhere down the line. Bryce Mitchell can do it. He can do whatever he wants in there. This is going to be an easy fight for Bryce Mitchell. Now, you don't got to like the guy. You don't have to like his views on whatever it is. You may like his views on whatever it is. But the objective consensus in this fight is that it's Bryce Mitchell's fight to win. It's going to be easy work. I don't even know why they made this matchup to begin with. But yeah, Bryce Mitchell for the easy work in whatever he wants to do from round 1 to 3. I would suspect there's going to be a finish maybe even earlier on, but we will see. So moving on. So back on to the banger of the card right here. Nate Landier versus Choi Doho. I got to be honest with you. This right here is a perfect fight to set up in the beginning of a pay-per-view. You're going to expect nothing but fireworks, but for who? This is a coin toss-up right here. I'm going to go with Nate Landier just based on the fact that he may just get the lucky shot out of the two. I just feel like between these two, when they start throwing bombs, it's going to be him that's going to land the lucky shot. And either way, it's going to be a back and forth, right? You're going to see very few scramble exchanges, a lot of exchanges with bombs on the feet. But for who? It could go to anybody. I'm going to go with Nate Landier on that one. So that right there is the main card. Let's move on to the prelims and the undercard. Maybe we'll start with the undercard first and then work our way up into the main prelims, which takes us to the first fight of the night. Kennedy Neganchochu versus Lucas Brecci. I'm going to have to go with Kennedy on this one. Yeah, I think I'm going to go with Kennedy on this one. No, you know what? I think I'm going to go with, yeah. I'm going to have to go with Kennedy on this one. I think that surprisingly, he's going to win by decision. I think that he's going to use his length, his range, just like what we talked about with the Ian Garry and the Shavkat Rakhmonov fight. And I think this is how he wins it. Now, is there a world where Lucas can knock out Kennedy? Yeah, of course, this is heavyweight fighting. That is a possibility. But if this fight draws any closer to the scorecards, make no mistake about it, this is going to a decision on his favor based on out jabbing. So I'm going to go with Kennedy for a decision on that one. Hey, listen, a lot of these predictions that I'm making right now, it's bold, right? You got Ian Garry as the winner for me. You got Kai Asukara as the winner for me. And not only that, as somebody that's going to knock him out. And then I got Volkov going for the knockout against Cyril Gane when they previously came from having a rematch. Okay, so, which by the way favored Cyril Gane. But yeah, this one right here, it's going to be the same way that Cyril Gane was beating Volkov the first time around, which is by a decision within this 3 rounds. So moving on to the, and next up on the card, we have youth versus experience. 42-year-old Clay Guida still going after it, taking on the 25-year-old Chase Hooper. This is an easy matchup for Chase Hooper. Honestly, I think this is one of those matchups where, like, all right, you know what? It's great to bring the old guy in here and put on a show. But in reality, this is one of those matchups where the old veteran is being fed to the up-and-coming prospect. We've seen it time and time again. Okay, Rory McDonald versus BJ Penn, I think, was a great example of that. In fact, the reason why I sort of referenced that fight, I could see this matchup where Chase Hooper is doing exactly that, sort of just out jabbing him, kickboxing him, hitting him from ranges where he's just going to cut up Clay Guida. He's going to give a good account of himself. Clay Guida has a great bounce to him, right? Obviously, one of the things that is prominent about Clay Guida is that he is a bouncy type of fighter, likes to move around up and down all over the cage, which, by the way, really falls in line with the Team Alpha Male way of fighting. If anybody's ever trained with Team Alpha Male out in Sacramento like I have, you'll see one of the things that Uriah constantly emphasizes is to constantly move around, right? Because if you're constantly moving around, you're a hard target to hit. I remember Uriah Faber had Lance Palmer come in there for the first time, right? Lance Palmer was just coming off as being a wrestler, transitioning into MMA. And the way that Uriah tried to get him to train was constantly move around your feet all training session long. So for a whole entire hour, even if you were resting in between rounds, move your feet around. Well, I got to tell you, this style is very inconducive once you get older. And I think that is where we are experiencing something very different with Clay Guida in this fight, which, by the way, is going to put him in very dangerous territories with Chase Hooper. I got Chase Hooper winning this one by a decision, and he's probably going to cut him up a few times with some kickboxing, if not threaten him a few times on the ground with potential submissions. But I think this is a decision win for Chase Hooper, an easy win nonetheless. Moving on to the card as we speak. All right, so next matchup here we have Michael Chiesa, the veteran, taking on Max Griffin, who, by the way, is also a veteran, but there's a difference between being a veteran in the regional scenes as opposed to being a veteran in the UFC. And I think that Mike Chiesa has made the majority of his runs in the UFC, whereas with Max Griffin, yes, he is a UFC veteran now, but I think more of his fights were in the regionals than, let's say, that of Mike Chiesa. Mike Chiesa has a lot of fights in the Ultimate Fighter as well that we can't forget and not take into consideration. By the way, very similar to Kai Asukara fighting multiple times a night in Rizin, just like how you fight multiple times within a span of a month in the Ultimate Fighter. But with this fight, I think we have to take a look at who is fresher at this age. Obviously, the age of 39 versus 36 with Mike Chiesa, right? I think this is where I would have to say Max Griffin ages way differently than Mike Chiesa. I don't know what it is. People out here in California age a little bit differently. Maybe it's just because I'm around a lot of people that are athletes or people that are into fitness or people that are into mixed martial arts, so on and so forth. But I think this is just a matter of who ages a little bit better. I'm going to have to go with Max Griffin on this one. Okay, for one, let's take a look at both of their last fights to sort of put this in perspective, okay? So Mike Chiesa, let's take a look at his last win, which was against Tony Ferguson, okay? It was against Tony Ferguson, rear naked choke, first round. I think that's standard. He should have been able to do that to Tony Ferguson, but then he loses to Kevin Holland, first round Darce choke, loses to Sean Brady by a decision. Really no shame in that. Vicente Luque, he loses to Vicente Luque by a Darce choke. Who would have thought Vicente Luque would be out there Darce choking people, right? But he does have a win over Neil Magny. That's a good win. Over Rafael Dos Anjos, sorry. But an aging Dos Anjos. Diego Sanchez. And then how about this? A win over Carlos Condit. And then he lost to Anthony Pettis back in 2018. So that's what we got going on for Michael the Maverick Chiesa. Okay. Well, let's take a look at his counterpart, Max Griffin. All right. Max Payne Griffin, Sacramento's own Max Payne Griffin. All 39 years old of them right there. See MMA Gold, his gym being represented right here in Tapology. By the way, the most trusted source of records and information in the world of mixed martial arts and boxing as well. Split decision win over Jeremiah Wells. Michael Morales gets a decision loss over him, gets a loss against Neil Magny, also has a win over Carlos Condit. How about that? Kenan Song gets a knockout from him, split decision loss over Charles Oliveira. So, okay, we got a little bit of a 50-50 fight here. I think that I'm going to go with Max Griffin on a decision on this one. I think that Max knows how to win. I think that he's going to push a pace on Michael Chiesa on the feet. It's going to be way much for him, and our very own Sacramento guy is going to get the win on this one. So moving on. And we have Chris Weidman versus Eric Anders. So this fight was supposed to be scheduled a couple of weeks ago. Didn't happen. Here we are, UFC 310 rescheduled again. I'm going to go with Chris Weidman by a decision. I think that his wrestling and his experience is going to matter here. Eric Anders is one of these fighters that has a football background, great athleticism. But I think this is one of those matchups where experience and pedigree in both MMA and wrestling is going to trump over the athleticism of that type that comes from NCAA football, the NFL, such as Eric Anders and many other people that have had that background. Greg Hardy, there's a limit. You're athletic, you can knock people out, you have the speed, but there's a limit, and I think the experience is going to play a factor here in this particular fight with Chris Weidman versus Eric Anders. So, yeah, I know a lot of people are going to be very surprised by that pick, but I go with experience over athleticism, and Chris Weidman has enough to get by. He didn't do too bad in his last fight against Bruno Silva. Okay, he didn't do too bad, but what about Eric Anders? What's Eric Anders coming off of? Let's take a look at and analyze where Eric Anders is at with his career right now. Both very identical records, by the way, right? But even though they have the same amount of MMA fights, 16-8 for Eric Anders, 16-7 for Chris Weidman. Still, Chris Weidman's experience is vast in the world of championship level MMA. Chris Weidman's been in there with Anderson Silva when Anderson Silva was at his prime. Chris Weidman was in there with Luke Rockhold. And Chris Weidman has been in there with Kelvin Gastelum, has actually beaten him while Kelvin Gastelum was in his prime. So Eric Anders was just in a grappling competition with Luke Fernandez and Charles Radich, as well at Fury Pro Grappling 9 and 10. So he's got a win over Jimmy Pickett in his last UFC fight. Has a decision loss. So, okay, he does get himself into a lot of decisions in this fight. So I don't see any difference with a Chris Weidman fight. I'm going to see Chris Weidman winning this by a close decision. A close decision, okay? Because Eric Anders is going to put up a fight. He's going to put up a fight. His athleticism is going to play into some kind of factor where he hits him with an explosive shot, rocks Weidman maybe a few times, but ultimately I think he survives and survives the fight another day because it's going to be Chris Weidman that's going to win this decision. Yeah, so moving on to the next. So next fight is Joshua Van versus Cody Durden. So Joshua Van coming off of a win against Edgar Chairez, unanimous decision. Prior to that, comes off of a win from Felipe Boons, ground and pound in the second round, and in his UFC pay-per-view debut, gets a decision win over Kevin Borjas. Now, let's move on to his opponent, okay? Cody Durden. Cody Durden, very good record, okay? Well, very experienced record, rather. Matt Schnell comes off a ninja choke back in September, so that's not too long ago. Turnaround in a quickness. Gets a decision win over Jake Hadley, Charles Johnson, and Carlos Mota. JP Buys, how about this? Gets a ground and pound finish, or I'm sorry, punches out JP Buys, gets submitted by Jimmy Flick, and has also been submitted by Muhammad Makayev, one of his well-known fights. I think Joshua Van is going to win this one by a decision. I think Joshua Van has enough wrestling to contend with him, to stand up and sort of keep the fight on the feet. But on the feet, I think he's going to outbox Cody Durden. It's going to be a decision win for Joshua Van on this one. So what else is on the card? Let's see. What else is on the card right here? Kennedy, Chase, Vicente Luque. All right. So we got Randy Brown versus Brian Battle. I'm going to have to go with Brian Battle on this one. He really showed me a lot in his last performance in UFC Paris. I think Randy Brown has a certain ceiling in the 170 division right now. We don't really know the ceiling of Brian Battle right now, but I think that he's going to come out winning this one, and I'm not going to be surprised if he knocks him out. I'm going to go with Brian Battle by knockout on this one. Vicente Luque versus Nick Diaz. That one got canceled. Movsar Evloev versus Aljamain Sterling. I got to go with Movsar on this one. He's going to out-wrestle Aljamain Sterling the whole entire fight. Will Aljamain Sterling be able to contend in the wrestling department with Movsar on this one? In all true to God honesty, I don't know, man. I don't see it. But I don't see Aljamain Sterling winning on this one either, right? I think that he was great at 135. He had a lot of power. He had a lot of height. He had a lot of advantages, which I don't think he's going to have here. He's very even Stevens right here in the featherweight division. And not only that, at 35 years old, taking on a prime Evloev, who, by the way, is just going to out-wrestle him this whole entire fight. How about this? Garembo versus Vicente Luque. Now, how about having The Rock helping you out, right? I believe this is the guy that The Rock is helping out. Let me make sure. And let me make sure that that is a fact here, okay? Because I believe Garembo, The Rock. Okay, so this is The Rock's homie, I believe. Yes, okay. Yeah, okay. So this is The Rock's homie. Yeah, he sort of sponsored his career. I got to tell you, man, I see Garembo winning this one. Okay, not just because he is sponsored by The Rock. Well, let me tell you something. I think that helps a lot. If The Rock sponsors your career, it's very helpful to you. Okay, and now he doesn't have to worry about anything other than just putting on his work ethic for the profession that he can do full time now with the funding of The Rock. Vicente Luque makes a lot of mistakes. He fights very reckless, okay? And I think Garembo is going to counter him in this fight right here. He's going to give him a counter shot, and he's going to be surprised. Look, man, you can't continue fighting the way that Vicente Luque does. You can't continue to do it. Okay, but he does. It makes him exciting. And not only that, this is a reason why he gets put on cards like this. So fighting out of South Africa. Let's take a look at the career and the life. He was the first Zimbabwean to win a fight in the UFC. Okay. Post-fight interview when mentioned it, he did not have a lot of money, that he had $7 in his account, caught the attention of The Rock, buying him a house, has a win over Nico Price, decision win over Ramirez, who, by the way, just came off of a devastating knockout against Mickey. Pete Rodriguez, Tashi Satu gets submitted by AJ Fletcher. And then the rest, he was fighting in EFC and UAE Warriors. So this is going to be a big test for him right here. Will he be able to do it? I got to tell you, it's really all dependent on how Vicente Luque decides to fight. Because you see, Vicente Luque is capable of fighting like a skilled fighter. The question is, will he do it? And that remains to be seen. If he doesn't, I think Gorimbo is going to hit him with a counter, an overhand right, or some of these swinging shots that they're going to try and bomb each other within the pocket. But either way, I think that Vicente Luque can't be fighting like that for a long time, and I think this is Gorimbo's fight to win. So moving on to the next. All right, well, the two men that have given Jon Jones the hardest fight of his career. So with that in mind, how will we see this fight go? Will Dominic Reyes use the footwork and outmaneuver Anthony Smith, or will Anthony Smith get him to the ground, submit him? I got to tell you, this right here is a 50-50 fight. I'm surprised they did not put this in the pay-per-view portion, but hey, it's a prelim main event, and it's perfect for the position that it's in because I just don't know who's going to win this fight. In all honesty, I'm going to make another bold prediction, since my whole entire theme for this whole entire card is making bold predictions. I'm going to go with Dominic Reyes by a decision. I think that he's capable of doing it. How will he do it? He needs to out-jab him, use the footwork, circle around the cage, and I don't think he'll finish Anthony Smith. Anthony Smith has a higher chance of finishing him. But I also think that this is Dominic Reyes' fight to win. Okay? Yeah, really, it is his fight to win. Let's take a look at his last fight. How did the last fight of Dominic Reyes go? Because I remember I did a video regarding his last fight. Dustin Jacoby gets a knockout in the first round, and that was Louisville, Kentucky card back in June 8th. I remember I made a card. I'm sorry, I made a reaction to this one. Let me show you that right now. Over Dustin Jacoby, a long time coming. I got to be honest with you. We've known or thought that Jon Jones was defeated by Dominic Reyes, probably one of the hardest fights of his career. Afterwards, Dominic Reyes went on to lose to a whole bunch of contenders and future champions, and as a result, never got the full credit that he truly deserved. So as a result, here he is tonight, finally getting sort of a redemption in his career. Obviously, we've known that Dominic Reyes is capable of a lot more. However, the losing streak that he had going on, I think, was really detrimental to his career. But tonight, he finally proved that, you know what? I can go out there and show the world what I'm really made of. Not by fluke mistakes, not by the judges' scorecards, and not necessarily anything that has anything to do with anything that was outside of his control, but rather showing that he was in full control and in full swing of things with a first round TKO victory that he has over Dustin Jacoby, as I'm witnessing it right now, while he is right now being interviewed by Paul Felder as we speak. So here's something that I think is positive to say about the future of Dominic Reyes' career. We're finally going to see his true full potential. But not only that, I think we also have to understand that when it comes to this game, there are mountains and valleys and peaks. In other words, you have the highest high and the lowest lows when it comes to wins and losses. You also have a lot of 50-50 matchups where in MMA, everything is a total 50-50 coin toss. And many of those coin tosses that he's experienced, unfortunately, was not in his favor. Tonight, it was in his favor, and I got to be honest with you, I'm really excited to see Dominic Reyes in the future and what he can do, and what are some of the future matchups that are going to be in his particular path. But either way, don't forget to Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that ride back to the future, but now back into the present. So, speaking of which, where I filmed that particular hotel was actually just right outside of Universal Studios. By the way, I do have a video on this channel where I document an entire ride on Universal Studios. So, I urge you guys to check that out. So, a little nice segue into this Back to the Future theme while sort of covering a Dominic Reyes video when I was at Universal Studios when he got his first win in a long time. So speaking of which, yeah, my final prediction on that, yeah, it's going to be Dominic Reyes by a decision win. And now here we are in the present moment of time. If you are tapped in right now, the 46-minute mark of this particular video, I'm now going to talk about Colby Covington versus Joaquin Buckley, the whole entire card. So we got Josephine Kunson taking on Pera Rodriguez, Davy Grant taking on Ramon Tavares, Miranda Maverick taking on Jamie Lynn Hort, Navajo Sterling taking on Tuco Tucos, Manel Cap taking on Bruno Silva, Sean Woodson taking on Fernando Padilla, Joel Alvarez taking on Jakar Close, and Adrian Yanez taking on Danielle Marcos. And then obviously, Colby Covington and Joaquin Buckley are on top of the card. You got Michael Johnson and Ottoman Azatar opening up the main card of this entire event. By the way, the last event of 2024. So feeling a little nostalgic on this one, right? Considering that it's sort of the last one of 2024, but nonetheless, the game moves on after this. It's going to be UFC 311 in Los Angeles with Armin Sarukian challenging for the 155 championship against Islam Makhachev. Then you got Vitor Perino taking on Dustin Jacoby. By the way, the guy that just lost to Dominic Reyes. We're going to take a look at the rest of his career up until this point. Cub Swanson taking on Billy Quintero in the featherweight division. And in the co-main event, Mackenzie Dern taking on Amanda Hebas. Ooh, that's a good matchup right there. So let's start from the top. Colby Covington versus Joaquin Buckley. This is going to be an easy win for Joaquin Buckley, hands down. It's going to be an easy win. For Colby Covington, I'm sorry, not an easy win for Joaquin Buckley. It's going to be a very difficult fight, actually, for Joaquin Buckley. It's going to be a very difficult fight. He's not going to get up. Colby Covington is going to hold him down, and at some point, he's probably going to submit him. Mackenzie Dern against Amanda Hebas. I believe this is a 50-50 fight, but I believe Mackenzie Dern is going to have the half guard position the whole entire time and just score and win on points. Cub Swanson versus Billy Quintero. Now, I got to tell you, this is an interesting matchup. Cub Swanson is a veteran. We understand that, right? He's been fighting for a very long time. But what do we know about this Billy Quintero kid? Let's take a look at his stats. Okay, 35 years old, former King of the Cage champion at 155, mind you, okay? Coming off of a loss against Yusuf Zalal. That wasn't too long ago. That was back in March. Has a win over Damon Jackson. Has been knocked out by Edson Barbosa. Lost to Shane Burgos. Now Shane Burgos is out in the PFL, but has a win over Alexander Hernandez. But what about Cub Swanson, the savvy veteran that we got in front of us right now, right? What do we got here? Cub Swanson coming off of a loss against Andre Fili, a split decision, very competitive in that one. That was actually fight of the night. Hakeem Dawodu, he gets a decision win over him. Jonathan Martinez, he actually takes out Jonathan Martinez with a TKO with some leg kicks. Has a win over Darren Elkins. Has lost to Giga Chikadze. Beats Ron Gracie by a decision. He doesn't finish him. So, okay. This is going to be a 50-50 fight. I think that Cub Swanson is going to come out the victor on this one by a decision. Yeah, I'm going to go with Cub Swanson for this one. Okay. So the next fight coming up after that one, you got Cub Swanson, Dustin Jacoby versus Vitor Petrino. I'm going to go with Vitor Petrino on that one. I know Vitor usually fights at 185, but he's fighting at light heavyweight in this one. This dude is high level. Okay, he's got great submissions. I think he's going to submit Dustin Jacoby in this one. Michael Johnson versus Oman Azatar. I got to be honest with you. I'm going to be a little bit biased on this one, right? Obviously, Michael Johnson, no disrespect to him. He's a veteran. I think this is Ottoman Azatar's fight to win. So I'm going to go with Oman Azatar on that one. Adrian Yanez versus Daniel Marcos, 16-0 at bantamweight. Very interesting. So let's take a look at Daniel Aaron Marcos, Peruvian, 5'7", 31 years old, fighting out of Lima, Peru. This is awesome. Okay, so he does have a Wikipedia page. Let's check this out. Okay, John Castaneda gets a win. Accidental groin kick against Qiu Long back in UFC. Hermanson versus Pfeiffer has a win over Davey Grant. Okay, he's got a win over. Okay, he's finished. He hasn't really finished anyone worthy. So we got an undefeated guy who hasn't really finished anyone at a top level yet, taking on someone like Adrian Yanez. So what do we got for Adrian Yanez? Identical in age, 31 years old, and in height as well, 5'7". Vicente Salvador, knockout win, has a TKO loss against Jonathan Martinez. Loses to Rob Font before that, and then gets a win over. So he's a kill or be killed type of fighter. I could see this decision win for Daniel Marcos. Okay, he seems to be a fighter that is okay with going to a decision, whereas Adrian Yanez, he can be a kill or be killed type of fighter, and that may be something that could work against him in this fight. But we will see. So moving on to the card. Okay, so Ian Machado was supposed to fight Joaquin Buckley on this one. Tracy Cortez was supposed to fight Miranda Maverick. That got canceled. All right, so the rest of the card right here. Joel Alvarez versus Jakar Close. Ooh, okay, this is a good fight. See, they're taking the year off with a good bang. So let's take a look at Jakar Close's career right now. Okay, so already 36 years old. Time has flown by with Jakar Close here. He's been in the UFC for quite some time now. We're talking about like all the way back till 2017. He's been with the company. So very good wins. But he's got a loss over Beneil Dariush that sort of halted him back a little bit. David Tamer loses by a decision, but that's about it. Joshua Alves gets a draw on that one. That was in the Tachi Palace fights. That's out in Lemoore, California, which is like 3 hours from here. But yeah, Jakar Close fights out of Michigan. So he's got a win over Joaquin Silva, Joe Rafa. So Joe Alvarez. Okay, so he's married to Courtney Casey. How about that? A fellow UFC athlete. Okay. So Joe Alvarez, what do we got on him? 31 years old, fighting out of Spain. Okay, very interesting character here. Has a loss against Armin Sarukian. No harm in that. Damir Ismagulov has a loss over him. And the only guy that this guy's really lost to Joel Alvarez is against a Dagestani. Now, how will that fare against Jakar Close? I'm going to have to say that, you know what? I think Jakar Close is going to get this one by a close decision. No pun intended. So the next fight after that, we have Sean Woodson taking on Fernando Padilla. 6'2", 145er in Sean Woodson. taking on Fernando Padilla, 16-5-0, 12-1 for Sean Woodson. I'm going to have to go with Sean Woodson on this one based on just the long jabs that he has. But he has a 6'1", 145er that he's taken on as well with Fernando Padilla. Now, let's take a look at some stats on Fernando Padilla from the past, okay? So let's see. What do we got for Fernando Padilla here? Not much, really. Just not a lot of history on this guy. So we don't really have a lot of tape on him, but man, I got to tell you, it will be interesting if he can use his height at 6'1", and Sean Woodson at 6'2" at 145, both really tall guys. He's got a Darstroke win over Luis Pantoja back in March. Loses to Kyle Nelson by a decision. Gets another decision loss by Spike Carlisle. So yeah, I'm going with Sean Woodson on this one by decision. I think he's going to out jab him the whole entire fight. He's not going to be able to deal with it. I think that Sean Woodson has just a little bit more umph to him in this one. I think that the shots are going to hurt. He's going to throw those jabs with bad intentions as he's sticking to him right in there. And it's going to be competitive because, look, what he can do to other 145ers, he may not always be able to do to Padilla due to the height. But if he gets there and he's accurate enough, I think that no matter what height you are or what height advantage you have, if you know how to jab, you know how to jab. And Sean Woodson definitely knows how to jab, and I think that he's going to take him using exactly that. Manel Kape versus Bruno Silva. I'm going to go with Manel Kape on this one. I think Manel Kape is looking really good as of lately. I think that's going to translate in this one. Will he finish him? No, I don't think he's going to finish him, but yeah, Manel Kape's going to win that one. Now, moving on. Navajo Sterling, 5-0. Navajo Sterling. Let's see here. 27 years old from City Kickboxing. Okay, so he fights out of that New Zealand camp. Coming off of the Contender Series left hook win over Philip Latau. Contender Series 2024. And he's coming into his UFC debut against Tuco Tucos. Okay, let's take a look at the stats on this guy right here. British fighter, 10-4. He's British, but he's got a British flag, but he's fighting out of Florida. Okay. So this is his UFC debut as well. So 2 UFC debuts for 2 undefeated fighters. I'm going to have to go with Navajo Sterling on this one by a decision. So, yeah. Let's see. Okay. So next fight coming up after this one. So, yeah. Navajo Sterling by decision. So next one, Miranda Maverick taking on Jamie Lynn Hort. I'm going to have to go with Miranda Maverick on this one by decision. I think her experience is going to be worthy enough to defeat Jamie Lynn in this one. Look, I think that for women's MMA, experience and brute strength and athletic ability trumps overall everything. And I think this is an easy call. It's going to be Miranda Maverick on that one. So moving on to the next fight that we have for the final fight of the year. What else do we have right here? Let's see. So we went over Maverick. Okay, Sean Woodson, we went over that. Davey Grant versus Ramon Tavares. Okay, so let's take a look at Ramon Tavares. Where is he at in his current trajectory of his career right now? Ramon the Savage Tavares, 10-2. coming off of a win against Siri Sidhi, split decision win, left hook, hammer fist before that. But he's also lost to Siri Sidhi by a straight right. Just, yeah, okay, very interesting. All right. Whereas with Davy Grant, let's take a look at Davy Grant, his opponent. 38 years old at 135. That's never a good thing to be that old in that weight class. But again, you never know. Coming off of a decision loss against Daniel Marcos, Rafael Assunção. He was actually able to submit Rafael Assunção. Has a win over Luis Smolka, has a loss over. Okay, so very competitive fights with Adrian Yanez and Marlon Vera. I'm going to have to go with Davy Grant on this one. Okay, I think Davy Grant will do enough to win this fight against Tavares, and I think he's going to do it by a close split decision, just like most of his fights where he goes the distance and, yeah, has these types of close matchups. I think that he's going to do enough to win. I think that they're both evenly experienced. Obviously, he has more fights than Ramon Tavares, but I think this is Davy Grant's fight to win this one right here. So I'm going to go with him by a very close decision. So next fight that we have moving on. Let's see here. What is the next fight? Cub Swanson. Okay, yeah, we went over that one. Manel Cap. Josephine. Okay. All right, so the last fight we have yet to cover, obviously the last but not the least fight of the year is Josephine Kunsun taking on Pereira Rodriguez. 9-2 versus the undefeated Josephine Kunsun, Swedish mixed martial artist. Undefeated. I'm going to have to go with her. She's got kickboxing experience, Muay Thai experience. I think that in women's fighting, whenever they have a kickboxing experience, they go a very long way. I don't see this being any different for Josephine Kunsun. Obviously, Joanna Jędrzejczyk had a very good career, but she had a prior experience in Muay Thai. Holly Holmes had a great experience not only in Muay Thai and kickboxing, but in the world of world-level boxing, was able to take it to MMA, become a champion. Look, I just think that there's a pattern with women having background in these individualized sports, whether it be kickboxing, boxing, or jiu-jitsu, and then coming over and dominating and winning championships, more so on the striking department than the grappling department. So I'm going to say for the women's side of things, whether that's 135, 45, all the way down to 25 or 15, it's the striking that wins the fights when it comes to the championships. When it comes to the men, historically, it's always been wrestling that was able to dominate that particular side of the competition. So that is all that I have for you on this one. I hope you guys enjoyed this content. I obviously went over why Shavkat Rakhmonov might lose Ian Garry. Check that out from beginning to end. Check out this content from start to finish. And by the way, guys, don't forget to like and subscribe, because we have the last pay-per-view of the year. And then right after that, the last card of the year, which I just went over right now. So I literally just gave you guys a prediction for all the last fights of the UFC in 2024 in this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I will see you guys in the next content, inshallah.